Well, you've got dark art operatives working in collusion with the DNC and the Clinton campaign, people that are even on calls with the White House, organizing agitation to create false narratives that Donald Trump's supporters are violent. And that's only the tip of the iceberg. Add to that the revelations in Wikileaks that there was collusion with the Clinton campaign and the Justice Department and Loretta Lynch. Now we understand why Bill Clinton got on that plane for 40 minutes. Also collusion with the State Department, telling the campaign when certain items about emails are going to be released. And, of course, collusion with the White House. Well, should we even release these subpoenaed emails between Hillary and the POTUS, meaning the president, and the president claiming executive privilege? You know, there's so much to all of this. Sifting through it, managing the information overload and getting down to the basics has now become a major challenge with only 22 days left to go in this campaign. Here to help us, though, is former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. How are you?
I'm doing great, and I couldn't agree with you more. There is so much material coming out that you almost need a guide to figure out what it's doing. Let me tell you, this thing that has been released today about these Democrats who are deliberately going out to stir up trouble is doubly ironic to me because I was asked yesterday morning on ABC about the intensity of Trump supporters, and about 3 hours later, we had a firebombing in North Carolina of a Republican headquarters by people who said basically Republicans need to get out of here. Now, I just thought it was a great irony that while the news media is wringing their hands about the intensity of Trump supporters, it was, in fact, Democrats who firebombed a Republican headquarters. And, of course, you now have this entire project indicating that there is a nationwide effort underway by the Clinton campaign and the Democrats to deliberately stir up trouble at Donald Trump events.
It is like Alinsky 101. You know, let me just give a quick summary, and then I would like you to weigh in on this. We know about the collusion with the campaign, the Clinton campaign, and the State Department, and the Justice Department, and the White House. We have example after example now in these emails how they would try to attack and use these underhanded tactics even against Barack Obama. They're the ones that wanted to imply he is a Muslim. They're the ones that, you know, talked about him not being American. You know, we learned that you can't count on what Hillary Clinton says, that she takes very different positions publicly and privately and brags about it. You know, we know that, you know, on issues as significant as refugees, she says we can't really vet them, but she wants to bring them in anyway. I mean, she's gambling with people's lives. You know, she's been a fierce critic of big banks, but she's taking literally millions of dollars from them, telling them one thing and taking a very different public posture. We know now why they used bleach bit, that she didn't wipe her server clean with a cloth, because she had to get rid of all of these emails because they did show a pay-to-play scheme that was being advanced, even taking advantage of money donated for the Haiti Relief Fund and giving contracts to their big money donors. I mean, I just don't know how to effectively sort through all of this and bring it to the audience.
Well, and you get specific things coming up that are just amazing. I mean, Patrick Hannity, the Undersecretary of State, engaging in a quid pro quo conversation with the FBI, which is by definition a felony. I mean, he's basically offering the FBI, we'll give you some extra posts overseas if you'll agree to reclassify these emails. You can't do that. That is totally illegal, and he ought to be fired today, and I'm glad to see several Republican committee chairmen this morning came out and said he has to be fired. This stuff is the kind of thing you go to jail for.
See, but I don't know if that's a fact.
Across the board.
But we've had so many investigations. We've got 22 days to go to get to an election. There's such a deep level of corruption here. It is, to me, a real threat to our American democratic system of politics.
Well,
it's that deep.
And I think that's part of what Trump has been trying to say when he talks about the election being rigged. I mean, when you get the news media spending 23 minutes, the three major networks spent 23 minutes on Trump's 11-year-old tape and spent 57 seconds, all three combined, spent 57 seconds on the WikiLeaks information about Clinton, it tells you how bad the fix is in the news media and how hard they're working to rig this whole thing. So I start with that premise. But let me give you what I think is, in some ways, one of the most astounding and interesting examples. And that is John Podesta's comments that wouldn't it have been better if somehow the killer in San Bernardino had sort of an anglicized name. that it was really unfortunate that he had a Muslim name. Now, you talk about total willful denial of reality, and you read that particular email done in passing, and it tells you the depth of their hostility to dealing with the real problems we face as a country. They're willing to lie about it, as Hillary Clinton did over the video as it related to Benghazi. There's just this endless process, and the more you learn from the WikiLeaks, the more you realize how corrupt and how dishonest they are. You also get insights into what I think is the most frightening part of this, and that is that the kind of people she's going to appoint, the kind of people she's going to surround herself with. When you look at the anti-Catholic bigotry, for example, among some of her senior staff, you say, oh, gee, I wonder what kind of Supreme Court justices she's going to appoint. Well, they're going to be radical left-wing secularists who are opposed to religious liberty, and they're opposed to our having the right to worship as we believe. And the very reasons America was founded are being repudiated by the Clinton people.
Let me go through more of the details. For example, poor Chelsea Clinton actually tried to warn about the quid pro quo and serious concerns about conflicts of interest, and she was called a spoiled brat. But now we know when the earthquake hit Haiti, 150,000 people died. And even then the Clintons couldn't stop cashing in. And literally Clinton insiders were separating out requests for friends of Bill or William Jefferson Clinton's VIPs so that these high money donors to the foundation would literally get first priority in terms of the contracts that would be ultimately given in the rebuilding of Haiti. Does it ever get any more cynical than that? Does it get worse than ABC and NBC and CNBC and the New York Times all literally in the tank for Hillary and nobody pays attention to it?
Look, when you look at the totality of what the Clintons have done in Haiti to poor people, it's fair to say that they replaced the American eagle with a vulture as their symbol. I mean, these are people who went in as millionaires and ripped off some of the poorest people in the Western Hemisphere. And at one point, Clinton's State Department was opposing an effort to raise the minimum wage in Haiti from $3 a day to $5 a day in order to protect the investment of a South Korean textile company. Now, think about that. I mean, and of course, part of what drives jobs out of the U.S. is they want $15 an hour here, while one of the reports is about Cheryl Mills talking positively about Ghana having a 23-cent an hour minimum wage because it makes it more attractive to invest in. Well, ask yourself a question. If you're a company and you have a choice of $15 an hour or 23 cents an hour, it's a sign of how much the Clintons have driven jobs out of the United States, and their ideas and their values have driven jobs out of the United States.
Where do you see all of this impacting the election? I mean, if you look at the polls, I mean, it's fascinating, the numbers that we have out today. I mean, you have Donald Trump up by 4 in Ohio. You have Donald Trump dead even in Nevada, dead even in North Carolina. You have him only down 4 in the Washington Post ABC poll. And I'm thinking after the last 2 weeks he had, she doesn't have a 50-point lead is shocking.
And the ABC poll showed a total movement of 2 points after 1 week of what my friend Barry Castleman called a media coup d'etat, a deliberate all-out effort by the media to destroy the chosen nominee of 14 million Republican voters. And I figured out that the total number of people who had to fix this were about 20 executives at major newspapers and television. So that means one elite executive for every 700,000 voters decided that they would try to see if they couldn't destroy the Republican nominee. I mean, it's the best example of how corrupt and sick the system is that I've seen. And it's beyond politics. It's the whole elite and their desperate desire to impose their values and continue to rip off the American people. Mike Allen, by the way, from Politico, just sent me a very interesting article by a guy who's an expert on what happened in Great Britain. And he says, if you look at what's going on in Austria, and you look at what's going on in France, you look at the vote on Brexit, and you look at how Labour collapsed in the last election in Great Britain, he said, do not assume that these polls have any accuracy. And he said that what you're seeing rise is a populist nationalism all across the world that is disgusted with the elites, disgusted with the corruption. and that is consistently surprising the pollsters. And I think that that's just a fascinating reminder that we're in unknown territory. I believe if Donald Trump would focus in on the corruption issue and give a series of speeches over the next 2 weeks, taking area by area and just laying out how corrupt it is. Take the Veterans Administration, which is literally killing American veterans, and where right now, today, after 4 years of talking about it, the suicide line, 1 out of every 3 calls goes into voicemail. Now imagine you're a veteran. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. You're seriously considering suicide. You decide, no, I'll reach out one last time. You make the phone call. You get voicemail because the Veterans Administration is so utterly, totally incompetent and corrupt. And that's just one more. You can go through agency by agency how badly we need somebody like Donald Trump to take it apart and rebuild it into a functioning, effective organization.
What do you advise Trump to do in this debate? And I have less than 30 seconds.
Be happy because he's going to win. Be positive. Stand very firmly on the big issues and stay big. And remind everybody over and over again of just how corrupt and how dishonest she is. But do it sort of cheerfully. She's the one who has the problem. She's corrupt and dishonest. He's not.
And how should he deal with these attacks that have been coming out?
I think he ought to say one time clearly, I've already dealt with all that. Now let me talk about the issues that matter to America's future. Just go past it with one sentence and keep moving. And he ought to talk about what he wants to talk about, not what the moderators want to talk about.
Yeah, that I agree with, too. All right. By the way, Newt is going to be this week at the Reagan Library. He's going to be at the Nixon Library. And tonight, he's at Barnes & Noble. Go ahead.
No, it's not. Barnes & Noble at Mira Mesa with Callista and with Ellis the Elephant and my new book, Treason. And you, by the way, have been amazing in the number of people who walk up to me at these book signings and say, oh, yeah, I heard from Sean, so I thought I ought to come over here. So it truly, if anybody wants to test how loyal your supporters are,
they're amazing.
The effect you have.
Barnes & Noble, Mira Mesa in San Diego, then later this week, the Nixon Library and Reagan Library. All right, Mr. Speaker, we'll see you on TV also this week.
Great.
Thank you for being with us.